Hello everyone, I'm your friendly neighbourhood Satanist, and today I am here to get you in the spooky mood. Even though it's not. December. 2020 has made it a little difficult to feel festive, so I've decided to try to lift both yours and my spirits. Pun intentional. With some appropriately seasonal sweet treats. Today I will be making an apparent American classic with a twist. I'll be making my own take on a dirt cake. Translated into non-American, this is a dessert which consists of layered chocolate pudding and cake or cookie crumbs resembling the titular dirt. Occasionally treats, particularly gummy insects and arthropods, get hidden in these layers for the eater to dig up, as it were. As much as this appeals to the 10-year-old in charge of my thoughts 50% of the time, I took one look at these cakes and thought, okay, but how do I make it a bit more me? Obviously, I chose to add some death. So instead of our garden variety dirt cake, and no, I will not stop with the puns, they are my mother tongue, I am giving you my totally legally patent-pending friendly neighbourhood Satanist cemetery cake. Or a graveyard cake if you prefer me to say it in colonial. Unlike the standard dirt cake, our dessert will be made up of a cream-like filling sandwiched between some homemade brownies. And that crumb layer, relegated to the top and only the top. For some reason the interspersed crumb layers just skeeve me out. Like everything I bake, this recipe will be completely dairy-free, and I will be providing some extra recipes for the items that usually include dairy, but if you do have your own recipes, feel free to skip forwards to whatever time it turns out to be. I'd classify this recipe as pretty easy. It's definitely kid, novice, or hungry stoner suitable, and probably only take you about a day of lazy baking. Before I really start, I will be baking some dairy-free brownies and some vegan shortbread to use. Given that shortbread is such a simple recipe, it's actually very easy to make it to suit your dietary needs. I personally will be using 1/4 cup of vegan butter, 1/2 cup of plain flour, 1/8 cup of caster sugar, and a pinch of salt. First thing to do is preheat the oven to gas mark 3 and let that heat up whilst you bake. It's advisable to cut up your butter or otherwise soften it somehow before beginning, as it just makes everything a little bit easier. This is a pretty easy recipe, as you just stick everything together in a blender until it forms a breadcrumb-like consistency. At this point, you're going to want to flour up some counter space and get kneading until it's a nice pliable dough. We're aiming for a well-handled clay consistency, so work is needed. Once you've got your correctly consistencied dough, roll it out to about 1 centimetre thick. Once you've rolled your dough to a thickness you find satisfactory, because hey, it is your life and who am I to tell you how thick your shortbread should be really, start cutting it into whatever shape you want. I'm going to be using some bone cookie cutters and cutting some biscuits for my headstones. Now, I don't actually own a headstone-shaped cookie cutter, which, now I think of it, is a massive oversight on my part. So I'm just going to be using a circular cookie cutter and stretching the dough out to get something closer to the desired shape. As an added step, I'm going to cut the bases flat just to get that shape completely right. This works pretty great in a pinch for last-minute goodies, and for those who would get less use out of a headstone-shaped cookie cutter than your average creepy stoner grandma type. If you're making a bigger dessert, feel free to use a gingerbread man cutter, and if they get damaged, well, they're just more authentic to your sweet cemetery. Then just pop these in that oven I mentioned earlier. It will vary exactly how long your shortbread will need to bake, but for me it typically takes 25 minutes. While these are baking, you may want to clean up, get started on the brownies, or attempt to summon yourself a friend from the other side. Personally, I like to use tuna, but it just summons black cats. Weird. When you want to get started on the brownies, you will need 4.5 tablespoons of vegan butter, 4.5 tablespoons of caster sugar, 2 eggs, 1 tablespoon of golden syrup, 4.5 tablespoons of self-raising flour, and 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder. Luckily, the first step is to preheat your oven to gas mark 3, or just leave it at the same temperature if you've baked your shortbread on the same day. Next, load it all into a bowl or mixer and mix away. One mistake I'm guilty of making most times I try this out is leaving the mixer to do its thing while I get on with other things, and inevitably the mixture will become overmixed, lose all its air, and fall flat. So keep an eye on your mixer while it's working. Once it's your typical cake mix consistency, just pour it into a greased cake tin and bake away for about 30 minutes. If you find yourself in need of something to do while waiting for your various elements to cook, you might want to get started on that pudding substitute. This is probably the easiest part and involves the vegan equivalent to crack, Oreos. You'll need Oreos, smooth peanut butter, icing sugar, and a little bit of water. Start by separating them out into fillings and biscuits, putting the biscuits aside for later. If your earlier summoning circle was successful, you may want to hide these away from your visitor. Them demons be steely. Mix together equal parts Oreo filling and peanut butter. Then add a little bit of water to your icing sugar to get it to that, typical icing sugar consistency. And add that in. If you do have an electric whisk with a meringue attachment that's a little more sturdy than mine, I'd recommend using this once you've beaten out most of the thickness from the mixture. This should make it all nice and fluffy, but again, it's still quite a thick mixture, so I'll leave that to your discretion. If you want this to look a little more dirt-coloured or just want a more chocolatey taste, you can substitute the icing for cocoa powder, provided that you mix it with boiling water instead of cold. Now that you have your brownies, shortbread, Oreo butter, and biscuit halves, it's time to assemble. First, cut your brownies to fit your dessert receptacle. That one is entirely up to you. Top it off with your Oreo butter and hide any of your chosen treats in there. For me, that's some shortbread bones and gummy bugs. Then take your Oreo halves and crush them until they resemble dried dirt. This is probably going to take a while, and you're probably going to want a friend to step in once the cramps develop. Layer these on top of the butter and add your headstone and decorate with any other flourishes you fancy. For me, that is mallow cream pumpkins and this delightful little shortbread skull my editor made, which we have called Gottfried. Now I know you might be thinking, my dude, it is literally December. Why have you made a clearly Halloween-themed video? Why is this not a Christmas craft? Well, procrastination is kind of a bitch. But if the lack of Christmassiness does upset you that much, I have a quick fix. Sit back and enjoy your dirt dessert with whoever's in your home this evening, and I will speak to you next time. Bye!